My name's Maeve. I'm 22. I'm currently an MPhil student at the University of Cambridge, and I set up and I run as the president of the Cambridge University Society of Women, which launched um, on the 27th of October, so really recently. And although we're inevitably receiving some pushback, we're also in the midst of holding and planning some really exciting events as the only single-sex society at the University of Cambridge. I went to a secondary school and then a sixth form college in Cambridge, funnily enough. And then I went to the University of Bristol as an undergrad and did a BA in French and Russian. And I think though it was while I was at the very end of secondary school when I was about 15 or 16. So that would have been in 2018, 19 kind of time. Which was basically when I saw a lot more about kind of all this word gender was coming up a lot, both in conversations with friends, but also online. I wasn't sort of chronically online as a young person, I would say, but it was something that I saw. It was kind of hard not to see it because I think that it was pretty ubiquitous, this idea of gender identity. To be fair, the word identity itself, and I remember in school, suddenly there were a lot more discussions about, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, by the way, but there were suddenly a lot more discussions about race and about sexuality and then this thing, gender identity. And right from the off, I guess I was skeptical because I couldn't point to I couldn't define it in the way that I could other traits of a given individual's identity. If anything, it kind of stumped me that it was so to do with the self-perception entirely. And the fact that, I just noticed that it directly had to come into conflict with biological sex in a lot of people's cases, i.e. you could be male, but that didn't make you a man, and all of these kind of weird language games like that. Anyway, and then, people in my school year, and it's especially true when I went to sixth form, I went to a really big state sixth form college, and people were there, kind of identifying out of their biological sex, and what that meant, as far as I could understand, was basically dressing per the stereotypes surrounding clothing, i.e., oh, I identify as a woman, so I'll wear a mini skirt and that kind of thing. It didn't seem like this was necessarily something that was happening because people, I didn't see it as something that was necessarily going to be a fix for this other kind of buzzword that I kept hearing, dysphoria, like gender dysphoria. Again, as far as I understood it, that meant a discomfort with your body, not necessarily because it was wrong, but because you didn't like it. And I remember wondering at how I didn't know a single girl that hadn't felt that at some point, myself included, potentially for quite a while. So I think I definitely came to this issue primarily as a young woman, then myself, well, a girl, I should say, because I watched it pertaining directly to other women, young women around me. I saw these girls, basically seeking to a get out and a way to kind of deny what fundamentally is immutable, which is your biological sex, whether you're male or female. That is true. It's a part of who you are. And how you engage with that is your own business. But to deny it altogether, I remember finding it so strange that how that had to enforce the speech and almost the thoughts of others. This idea that it was offensive if I didn't perceive her as a guy. So it was kind of, deny the evidence of your own eyes to yourself daily. And I just didn't understand how that was helping anyone. And I had discussions about it at the time with some of these girls, and it wasn't that I was kind of asking these sort of gotcha questions at all. It was that, it came from a place of genuine concern and a desire to understand. And I should add, I used to, go and read books or, I don't know, blog posts or whatever written by trans identifying people to kind of, not all the time, by God, it didn't kind of consume my life, but at times to I guess almost convert myself out of the mindset that I found myself in, because I knew it to be kind of the bad one, i.e. not socially acceptable among my demographic. But ironically, this was long before I read anything that was, gender critical. But ironically, everything that I was reading, sort of pro-trans stuff, basically, it served to convince me further that my skepticisms were valid. So still at college, I should say that the COVID pandemic happened and pretty much wiped out like my physical experience of being at college from the March of the first year. And then, but then to be fair, by the end as well. So I kind of got the start and the end of the sixth form experience. The rest of it was online. So I don't remember it actually, like, it's not like people were sort of confronting me, in part because I was not holding these views publicly. I wasn't saying stuff among friends, especially young male friends, I should add. People would kind of, I guess, especially, young guys who I was mates with would almost laugh at kind of the absurd nature of what it is that they were seeing. And it was kind of to seek to identify out of your biological sex. It was, I guess, people associated it with, like, it was kind of alternative, it was kind of different. So kids who maybe at one point would have been emo, like, now they were trans. It was a thing. It wasn't necessarily the case. Like, I played sport quite seriously, and I had groups of really kind of, just like nice outgoing mates. And it wasn't necessarily young people who were kind of popular and confident who sought out of their physical bodies. That wasn't how it worked, because obviously when you're that young, especially again among young women, to be trans necessitates a deep discomfort with your physical form, and then arguably your mind itself. It's like this idea, oh, my brain's somehow not sexed in the right way, like I'm not supposed to be the sex that I am. So I don't, functionally, like, somebody who's comfortable in their position doesn't seek escape from it, do they? So it was interesting, the kind of person who sought out transition and stuff. I couldn't tell you who was on hormones, who wasn't, who was doing what. It was a question of kind of, people correcting you about their pronouns, and you making sure you got to remember what name they're using that week and all stuff like that. I'm not trying to pretend it was some massive imposition. It wasn't. There was something more sinister, which is that it was en masse desire, especially among young women, to get out of their bodies, and in an acceptance by everyone else. Yeah, you're right, your body's wrong. I spoke about this kind of thing a lot, and I was interested in having discussions about it, both with people who agreed with me and were kind of gender critical, gender skeptical, whatever you want to say, turfy, whatever. That happened when I started going to more like political events, really, and kind of conferences and talks and, discussions and debates and things like that. When I was at university, basically, that's when I started doing a lot more of that kind of thing. Not necessarily in Bristol. Most of these things were in London or elsewhere. But so I started meeting up with people who were really kind of like me, knew a lot about the transgenderism, trans ideology. Well, they called it that, trans ideology, and I realized that in my own head that's what I sort of said to myself as well. And it was amazing to just speak to other young people who were like, oh yeah, no, I'm so on board. I think it's dangerous. Yeah, other young women calling it dangerous. It was really, it was good to know that I wasn't alone. I would have believed it anyway, even if I'd never met anyone else. But yeah, that was good. And then but as I was going to say, I didn't write anything down, let alone publish anything under my own name, because this was 2021, 22. There hadn't been the kind of windfall moments that we've now had regarding stuff like CAS, stuff like the Supreme Court ruling. And there was legitimate risk of me potentially being disciplined somehow at uni. The social ostracism stuff I wasn't too stressed about, because I knew that a lot of my closest friends, like, they either totally agreed with me or didn't really care either way, so that was fine. But Yeah, it was in my fourth and final year. My course was 4 years. That's another reason. I was abroad for a year as a languages student. I lived abroad, so I was like, if I come out and say stuff and want to do campaigning and I'm not even in England, how helpful is that really? But anyway, yeah, my final year, I just like towards the end of it, even I just made an X account and then did some campaign stuff. I was in women's groups in Bristol, like the Women's Rights Network, and an amazing women's group called the Women of Wessex, and I did campaigns with them and loads of stuff. The university itself didn't really do anything. I remember because I don't think they necessarily really cared, in part because they knew I was leaving like quite soon. This was, yeah, literally not long before my finals. Like there was, I was kind of home and dry, and I think, yeah, it didn't really matter. Also, there had been the Supreme Court ruling, which meant that Bristol was already slightly on the back foot, and this Bristol uni, and they were quite, you know, there were things that they had to kind of backpedal on, excuse me, because yeah, Bristol University, like many others, has made its stance very clear regarding, it's a kind of affirm policy. There's no scope to challenge, especially the gender stuff. I remember talking to my mates at other unis and they were in disbelief. Like Bristol, there are posters everywhere that say my existence is not a threat. What are you scared of? With the trans flag, it's like massive trans flags everywhere, progress pride flags, which I find darkly symbolic because I believe trans ideology is deeply homophobic. Um, you know, all of this stuff was happening at Bristol. They have a gender expression fund, which is literally where you can claim a kind of, as they put it, queer gender identity, and then you can go and get money to have a gender affirming haircut. But then you can also claim money as a 18-year-old girl to get a binder to compress your breasts. They also encourage people to do DIY hormone replacement therapy. So just get and take and administer your own drugs, basically. They encourage that. That is not uncommon. There's a gender expression fund at Cambridge. There's at most colleges. I think probably all. There's a gender expression fund at Leeds. There's a gender expression fund everywhere. It's basically not only do we encourage emotionally people to seek to opt out of their biological sex and deny that it's immutable or relevant in the first place, we also want to throw money at making that as easy as possible, i.e., make drugs accessible. The Society of Women it exists in part because I was very keen to be in an all women's society, which sounds a bit ridiculous, but it's as simple as that. Like I was excited about a part of my university life being that I'd be in a women's group. I hesitate with the word feminist because I believe it's been really misused, but I'll kind of expand on that in a sec if you don't mind. The Society of Women is the kind of society that I'd like to be in. And when I got here, I went to the university freshers fair. This was before like academic classes even started. And the freshers fair, as you know, it's a lot of kind of stickers and freebies and, come and join hip hop society, like that kind of thing. And so you would think I think there are hundreds of societies at the Uni of Cambridge. Some are kind of officially registered with the uni or the SU, some aren't. Regardless, you're looking at 500 plus, and sports ones, like there's so many. And there's a society for everything under the sun: Taylor Swift Appreciation Society, Doctor Who Society, like every genre of music you can think of. It's amazing. The Freshers' Fair was a massive event. And I walked around and there was a kind of section for like activism societies. And there were societies that their membership was, based on race, nationality, sexuality in some cases. There wasn't a single society that was women only and advertised as such, not a single one. The only all women's group that kind of happened to exist isn't even permitted to be a society in its own right. It's the fact that the Islamic Society, they have events, they advertise events to brothers or to sisters, so that pretty much all of their events are single sex. Yeah, so every college, I should add, actually, and not all of every college, as far as I'm aware, assuming that there's a committee to run it every year, college as they're called, femsocs, so feminist societies. And yeah, those are basically yeah, there's a big group of them. That there must be pretty much one per college of the 31 colleges. Yeah. And the femsocs, you know, based on the name, you would think that they'd be pretty geared towards women and maybe even have a women only membership, but none of them do. Or if they will say something like, yeah, we're women only, and women includes trans women and non-binary people. In fact, yeah, that's a key. Just a lot of these societies would say women and non-binary a cappella club, that kind of thing, or you know, women asterisk. Like, I'm not bothered if these societies exist. Of course they can. I'm not the one trying to ban a society. That's them. I just also want there to be a women only one. And the extent to which that is perceived as unreasonable, I literally cannot overstate. Like, I'm deemed insane for wanting to have a society that's women only and means it. After the freshers fair, basically, I left and I was standing there. I was so kind of annoyed, and suddenly it just hit me like, oh, you finished one degree and that took it was long and hard and kind of, yeah, and frustrating. And then I just felt like an idiot for having been a bit optimistic that maybe there'd be something. You know, I knew that it wouldn't have changed overnight. Supreme Court ruling, for a lot of people, it's pretty fresh. It's just happened by a lot of people's metrics, really. And I know things change slowly, and I know that cultural shift, oh, it moves so slowly. Of course it does. But yeah, after the freshers fair, I just felt so frustrated, and I felt like optimism had been totally to my detriment. And I was like, oh my God, I will feel alone in this again, even though I know that I'm not, because I know that people call bullshit on this stuff all the time. And I know that this frustrates people. And you don't even have to be that reasonable to share a view with me on this front. And then, yeah, I rang Thea. And then I was like, I think I was literally, it sounds really ridiculous, but I was slightly tearful simply because I think it was kind of the weight of so many things. And, you know, I was thinking about all of the women that have campaigned and lost stuff and suffered basically to just regain rights, not even gain rights, just regain them. And it felt like I was just banging my head against a wall. It was ridiculous. So anyway, I was like, well, I really want to be in a society that's women only, so I'll make it. A couple of things to say here. One, the aim of the society is to promote women's free speech, and then as a result of that, be able to discuss and then work within and surrounding women's sex-based causes, basically. So some of our events will be, you know, for example, a panel debate followed by a discussion. And some of our, you know, one of the things we're doing in society is we're setting up a book club, that kind of thing. And then we're also, it's kind of in the works at the moment, so I won't say specifically who, but we're in contact with local charities basically to do some campaigning work on a local level, because I think especially as a student, you know, you're energy and time rich, even if you're cash poor, so you're good at students are sort of the protesting demographic for that reason. So we can absolutely use our membership base for good in that sense, and kind of get some on the ground stuff done, whether it be awareness raising or like practical stuff. But also our speaker events are something I'm really excited for, because we've already had contact from so many people, majority women, basically offering to come and speak. These are women who've done amazing work and are, you know, high profile people and really respected in their fields. So that will be good, because we could hopefully open up a lot of those events to the public. So it won't just be for members only, which means it'll be a mixed sex audience. And you don't have to, you know, condone the society or join it or anything. If you just want to come and listen, you can come and listen. And again, there will be a kind of discursive element after, with a lot of time given to Q&A. So those are the kind of events we'll be running generally. But as you say, within the university, there's some work that can be done, I believe, by the society regarding, even if not rectifying, pointing to some of the current issues that I think the university is just ignoring, when it comes to the fact that women's sex-based rights are just not protected. They're not. And that they've totally been allowed to be collateral damage for the sake of, within this kind of fight to promote people's gender identity. Like, always the onus is on women, always. And that's done to me. So some of the things that we're interested in, basically stories that I think need to break. One of them is Newnham College, which is why we kind of wanted to expose that in conjunction with the launch of the society, because one of the committee members and my dear friend Serena Worley, who's the secretary of the society, she's at Newnham, and she and I were at they had a kind of meeting to discuss their admissions policy, and in that meeting they basically, the principal of the college, Alison Rose, and a board of other senior members of the college were just doing this kind of weird reassurance to a room of women, saying, don't worry, we're still going to accept, well, trans women, but read men. So, and they were talking about legal loopholes, they were talking about thwarting the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, which in my mind, I sat there totally just straight faced, but I'm still, my mind boggles at the arrogance of that, especially when you consider that of all the all-female spaces, which are all equally as important as one another, but the historic element of Newnham College, its alumni include Virginia Woolf, and they're deciding in a university of 31 colleges where 29 are mixed sex, they think that Newnham shouldn't in any way try and defend its women-only status and should welcome men who identify as women. Like, I think it's ridiculous. So that's one thing. Sport, huge. There's a massive story that needs to basically break there, which I'm kind of in the process of amassing a bit of an evidence base. Rowing, kind of, there was discussion about that earlier. Was it in November? Yeah, kind of over October, November thus far, regarding how even to very high competitive level, rowing at this uni is also just really keen to promote gender ideology, i.e. not have single sex categories by any means. So there are men in a lot of the women's boats. Last year at the bumps, I don't have reliable statistics for this, but young women who've spoken to me who've been at this university for longer said that last year at the bumps, like, you were looking at almost half the boats had at least one man. The boat for Christ College had 3 men in it, the women's ones. So that's, not only is that just unfair, it's also 3 women that aren't in the boat. So the Women's Football League, it's another story that we're going to kind of expose, basically. And I want the Women's Football League to be restored, because it doesn't exist anymore. There's only a mixed one, because they thought that having a women's league was trans exclusionary. I don't think that I need to go into why we sex categorize in sport in the first place. The physiological differences between men and women are, like, they're extremely stark. Everything from bone density to blood oxygen capacity to size of limb, to especially one of the points at which the difference physiologically between men and women is the most clear, whether they're the furthest apart, regardless of training, is brute force. So an Olympic athlete, who's a woman Olympic athlete, like, her brute force will still, in most cases, be way, way, way below a totally untrained, unfit man's brute force capacity. Having a kind of women's league that accepts men is one thing. The removal of a women's league altogether, like, they're not even hiding it anymore. This is blatant misogyny. It's a kind of, we don't care about women having their space, their sport, their right to fair competition. People just don't care. The pushback, there are a couple of things that happened. So our launch, God, I wasn't kind of cutting a ribbon. It was literally an X post, an Instagram post, and an article by the journalist Nick Wallace. And in that article, he talked about the society, but he also talked about Newnham. Like I say, it was 2 stories kind of in conjunction. And so on the X post, this was in the morning, Monday, October 27th, and there was such an outpouring of support, likes, reposts, people messaging us. We didn't even have a website or anything at that point. We had an email address, which you could kind of find online if you had a look. And it was just people, men, women, people from all over the world, literally just saying how pleased they were. You know, really, really significant women within feminism, you know, were following us, messaging us, endorsing what we were doing. Like J.K. Rowling followed us, for example, which is cool. A lot of stuff happened really quickly. This was on X specifically. On Instagram, which of course is used predominantly by a different demographic, like a sort of younger one, I would say, in part because of its nature, it involves less reading. On Instagram, our post was pretty quickly inundated with comments being like, yuck, this is disgusting, vile, bitches, fascists, all of this kind of stuff. Like people just saying really, you know, I guess sort of nasty things. We hadn't posted a picture of ourselves on Instagram. That picture of us was only on X. And I know that in part we didn't post a picture of our faces on Insta because people would just say shitty things about our appearances, to be honest. I'm not afraid of that. Like they can say what they want, but especially with Instagram, I was like, okay, we can do a bit of damage control preemptively here. And so all we posted was a statement of intent, declaration of intent, which was about 200 words, if that, over a couple of slides. And it literally, we didn't even say the word transgender. We just said promote women's sex-based rights and causes. And obviously, yeah, it totally blew up on Instagram in a negative way. But there was also so many messages, like private messages, of people who wouldn't put this in a public comment section, but people saying things to the tune of, oh my God, I'm so happy this society exists. Like my sports league doesn't exist anymore. My, you know, my college doesn't have single sex bathrooms. Like people coming out, young women coming out of the woodwork and just telling us that they were happy that we exist, and then asking how to join. And so, yeah, there were a couple of days between the launch and the website being launched online because we were so keen to launch the society and also worried that we wouldn't get that many people who wanted to be members. Well, I thought we'd get a fair few, but that it would kind of be dribs and jabs. So, like at the start, I mean. So we kind of, I also remember Theo and Serena and I agreed without even a discussion that we'd vet everybody who joined, well, who applied for membership, I suppose. But anyway, so people were DMing us, and then I was setting up meetings, being like, okay, I can meet you at Tuesday at 11, I can meet you Wednesday at 4, like all of these little, you know, 15-minute slots to meet up with these women who were like, I must join, I'm in. And then, yeah, I've built a website for the first time really, really quickly so that we could accept membership applications more easily. But crucially, and this is kind of, sorry, the final bit about what happened immediately after the launch, people wanted to donate. Hundreds and hundreds of people on Twitter were saying, how can we help? I want to give money. A lot happened after the launch, I'll level with you, so it's kind of hard to like pull everything in. So the petition's actually pretty small fry. It's got like what, a couple of hundred signatures, and also the uni will do absolutely nothing about it, and they don't care because it's literally just people who, like, anyone can sign it. Like I could go and sign it right now, but you could sign it right now. Like it doesn't, it's nothing to do with anything. It's not an official complaint procedure by any means. Don't get me wrong, if it amassed 10,000 signatures, maybe the uni would have something to say. As it stands, I think it's got about 250, and it's existed for what, 2.5, 3 weeks. So, you know, traction wise, it's not been that successful. But the other thing that did happen was there was a series of statements put online on Instagram by, so the Girton FemSoc, the president of whom does not like me or the society and has messaged me informing me helpfully of that. She wrote a statement basically saying, you can go and look at it online. I can provide you with a picture of it, but it says something to the tune of feminism that isn't intersectional, isn't considerate, constructive or effective, basically 3 words like that, to kind of imply that our feminism wasn't feminism in the first place, nor was it helpful, because we were a single-sex society. That was literally it. And they didn't name us, but that happened about 48 hours after we first posted on Instagram, and they got 30 plus other societies, many of them femsocs from other colleges, to kind of put their names to this Instagram post. I won't say sign it, because it was like effectively sign it though. So, and then that was posted, and underneath in the comment section, it was just loads of slander, really, being like, oh my God, the CUSW, they're so vile, they're so evil, like, we have to get them shut down, like, let's work together on this. So glad that we know who the real feminists are, like that kind of thing. Just like basically implying that there's not any kind of space for feminist societies that aren't for women only, and one that is. I remember finding it quite funny that, and I said this before, but that 30 plus feminist societies at the Uni of Cambridge were mobilized by me and my 2 mates and a couple of Google spreadsheets. Like, it's quite funny. We hadn't done anything by that point, and we hadn't planned any events. We'd literally just launched the society so people knew it existed as quickly as possible. And yeah, that kind of collective outrage from the femsoc speaks to something that's a trend among, yeah, people in societies like that. They love a kind of a cause where there's a clear right and a clear wrong, and they know that they're in the former category. So we're just yet another kind of monster under the bed for them, and that's why they're seeking to stamp us out. But what's interesting is that I genuinely believe there's space for both. Have your intersectional feminism, have it. Let's see what happens. Like, let's see how it goes. I've got absolutely no desire to shut down societies. I think that's ridiculous. That's obviously, it's somebody trying to stop us speaking freely, and in this case, honestly. Anyway, so that statement was one thing. Then a society at Newnham who call themselves the Butch Society. They describe themselves as being for butchers, femmes, and those who love us, holding fun events for genderqueer people, or for queer people. So they're kind of, they're sort of, it's a society basically for women, predominantly for lesbians, who don't really like either of those words. And that's fine. So they put out a proper targeted statement that named us. It refused to name Serena, but it referred to the secretary, in part because this is a Newnham society and Serena's a student at Newnham. And it just was totally disparaging. And then it kept calling us fear-mongering and aggressive, obviously transphobic, bigoted, kind of uneducated, dangerous. It referenced, how supposedly trans women or trans people have been instrumental in, feminism in the first place. And don't we know that they actually started kind of modern women's rights and everything? And yeah, so that was quite sort of helpful to read, just to understand their stance. And that was that. And then other than that, so you've got kind of society pushback. The Cambridge Student Union, we tried to register with them, and after waiting 13 out of the maximum 14-day period, we got back a snippy email being like, well, you use Cambridge and University in your title, so you can't register with us, you have to register with the university as a whole, then you can come back. So that's what I'm doing now. And I should have an outcome on that in the next week or so. It's a more official and bureaucratic process, but I'm fine with that. I want us to be legitimized as a uni society so that we can, so people know we're a society like any other. And so that Cambridge University, via that process, have to admit that we have every right to exist. Early doors, Varsity, Cambridge's student newspaper, wrote about us. One of the co-editors, Charlie Rowan, interviewed us, and obviously did the whole kind of, he just wasted time, really. He spent all the time talking about, so what about trans women? And then I pushed him to like, what do you mean by trans women? And then he, not that he put this in the article, but he was like, well, men, I guess. And I was like, well, there's your answer. Obviously they're not members of the society, it's a society of women. So that was a bit boring, and he just published something basically saying transphobic society launches at Cambridge, yada yada yada. It was a bit more balanced than I thought it would be. He did quote us a bit, but obviously, he's writing for a readership. And then the Cambridge Tab, which is a student-led, it's more kind of magazine vibes, but it's just an online publication. One of the editors, wrote a piece about the society kind of more broadly, and kind of talked about some of the pushback and sort of validated a lot of people's anger at the society. So again, by no means an impartial article. And then today, two have come out, one again in Varsity and one in the Tab. The Varsity one is, to be honest, pathetic journalism, because it talks about our funding, and I know, because I met up with him and asked him, the guy's kind of modus operandi was literally to go through the list of people and pick out anybody he perceived to be right wing, and then sort of write that they had donated. Bear in mind that plenty of very openly and avowedly left-leaning people have donated. It's a pretty even split, to be honest. So he's just trying to kind of smear the society and call it some kind of like evil conglomerate that's taking money from Russian people. Oh my gosh. And then the other Tab article that came out today is an interview with me. And she just asked questions that readers could submit. And a lot of the time they were like, do you acknowledge trans people exist? What are you going to do about intersex people? Just for reference, intersex is not really a respected scientific term. People with differences in sexual development exist, and they're 0.0018% of the population. So to put that into perspective, Cambridge has about 26,000 students. That's 4 people. So I'll just cross that bridge when I come to it, I think. The current Chancellor of the University of Cambridge, whose name is Chris Smith, Varsity approached him for comment loads, basically to condemn the society, and he didn't. And he has said that free speech is the most, like, such an important thing at the moment in the university. And I think that's also a story in Varsity today. Like, he has really, really been clear on that and held the line regarding the importance of free speech. Is that direct support for the society? No. Is it a refusal to condemn the society? Yes. So not the same thing, but I feel very positive about that. And given that student papers are basically running really low, poor quality spear campaigns, that is a big win. Not just for us, but for other societies, and the student population more generally, regardless of how students seem to hate free speech at times. Kind of like medicine, like, it's good for you anyway. One thing I will say is Cambridge, given its sort of collegiate structure, the size of the city that it's in, I mean, it's only 125,000 people, the nature of the university, the nature of the people who come, the Cambridge bubble is very much a thing. And what's interesting to me is that I can wholeheartedly say that the views that I hold regarding free speech, but I guess more specifically in this case, women's rights, and how gender ideology necessarily has to erode women's sex-based rights, and men's, I should add. Those views are not uncommon at all. They're extremely, I mean, they're reasonable, but they are not weird views to hold in the world more broadly at all. In Cambridge, I also believe that they are a commonly held view. I'd wager the majority. Are they a publicly held view? No. So what that means is that a loud minority can rule the roost and point at us and say, aren't they so weird? Aren't they so out there in the wrong way? Like, aren't they so backward? They're not with the times, wrong side of history, all of this kind of thing. So, that's what's happening at the university. There's a kind of this weird superiority complex held by a loud minority. And I hate to say it, but like, I think they're so detached from the real world, and that will be to their detriment. Like, what's your plan? Stay in a kind of privileged student zone for the rest of your life? It's not going to work. So I'm glad that, if anything, the society will just shake things up a bit. I welcome attendance from people who say they hate or reject the idea of the society. I think there's space for us to talk about this and coexist peacefully. and all that stuff. I'm not trying to ban anyone.